Star Ocean 2 recently got brought back to the gaming world with great results, but that wasn't the first game of the series to come back to handhelds through the Nintendo Switch. A PSP remake of the first game came as well, not as redone as the Second Story R, but more based on its initial remake. So, let's dive right in. Here is my review of Star Ocean First Departure R for the Nintendo Switch. This story centers around Roddick, part of his village's defense force that comes into a crisis when a nearby town comes down with a plague that has no cure. He's then sent on an insane journey when he is visited by two humans from the planet Earth, not only finding out that space travel is real, but that he can cure the plague, but only by going to his own planet in the distant past. With the two Earthlings, he had a friend go on a time travel journey into the past to retrieve the vaccine and save his planet in the present. Now overall, this is a pretty good story, not as good as some of the later entries when it comes to character development, but it's very interesting and takes no time getting right into the crazy sci-fi elements that meld with the fantasy RPG. When it comes to gameplay, this is a 2D and 3D action RPG. As you play, you'll explore an overworld, visit towns, and fight enemies in 3D-ish arena-style combat. Now there's not a lot to say about this version of First Departure. They basically just took the PSP remake of the original Super Nintendo game, added a toggle to be able to dash instead of just walk, and that's about it. As we get to main progression, it's similar to other classic JRPGs, though a bit more restrained than its successor. The story pushes you forward on an overworld to new towns and dungeons. There is a little bit of freedom with some areas you can get to before you're supposed to, but a lot of the game, especially early on, is very linear with you being guided to a specific place to go next. But a lot of this is very much classic RPG with shops and towns to sell you new weapons and armor, items to use in combat, and occasional little side missions and optional areas like the arena. We also have a similar character recruitment mechanic. You have more characters available than character slots. Certain ones won't join if others do, and it's actually a lot more difficult than it is in the later games. For example, if you want Eris and Ioshua, two of the game's best mages for both healing and damage, you have to recruit or not multiple very specific characters, really making you look into and plan out your party beforehand. The biggest difference you will see, however, is the combat. For some, this is how we were introduced to the Star Ocean series on handhelds. They took a rather confusing Super NES system and turned it into a hack and slash style action RPG with arenas. You can run up to opponents in 3D-ish environments and do simple physical attack combos along with skills and spells. It's similar to what we just saw in Star Ocean The Second Story R, though the skills don't meld and link as fluid. It still works and is fun, just not as quote-unquote modernized. Though how encounters work was not changed, and I'm kind of glad. In the PSP games, you had encounters that triggered anywhere in dungeons and the overworld and not just wandering shadow clouds like we saw in Second Story R. While this random encounter bit did make it a little more difficult with constant encounters showing up, it also made it very easy to grind if you wanted to cheese through it. You could just keep the PSP's analog stick pushed to the side or keep the triggers held down to move around the overworld, and the game could play itself if you have a good setup for healing and fighting. Now after battle, you gain experience, characters level up and learn attacks, and you get skill points to learn a lot of passives like stat increases, specialties, and the likes. Now overall, this gameplay loop is fun. The only thing that really brings it down is the amount of backtracking you have to do. There are many story events where the party will see something happen and go back to earlier areas. Without a fast travel option outside of ships and port towns, you have a lot of traveling by foot, which in turn will give you lots and lots of random encounters you're going to be overpowered for. A bit of backtracking isn't bad, but with the amount they threw in here, it's pretty clear why the recent remake of 2 added a fast travel option. Now when it comes to content and length, don't expect it to be super long. First Departure will take you about 20 hours to complete, give or take. Still enough time for an RPG, but nothing huge. Next up is presentation, which is pretty good. This version retains the PS1-like pre-rendered backgrounds of the PSP, though they are more detailed and upscaled here, not having the really blurry look of those original handheld entries. The 2D sprites here also look nice and fit in really well with the retro look of the backgrounds, especially with some of them having depth to things in the backgrounds but having that top-down look. Before we get to performance, let's talk about the audio. There is one glaring issue here, and that is the English dub. Now, the dub is good in cutscenes and all the story bits. The problem is combat. First Departure features very little in variety of battle commands, so when you're in combat and your allies use the same skill over and over, they're gonna scream the same phrase over and over and over again, and it gets very annoying very quickly. So much so that I decided I didn't need to hear English dub during the story and just switched to Japanese audio. Then we get to performance, which is great. First Departure R features a smooth 30 FPS from start to finish. Then we get to battery life. First Departure R gives the original and light models a range of 4 to 5 hours, and the V2 and OLED models get 7.5 to 8.5 hours. In conclusion, the first Star Ocean has come back to handhelds with everything the PSP versions had, with a small quality of life improvement via the run button. Now, on the downside, the English dub creates some very repetitive points during combat, and the backtracking without fast travel can be a bit irritating. But if you don't mind the backtracking, this is still a good RPG from its story to the combat system. Reviews to Go rates Star Ocean First Departure R for the Nintendo Switch an 8 out of 10. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.